Welcome, everybody, to episode 196 of the Horrific Podcast. It's been a few weeks since we've done one of these, just because we've been so busy with other podcasts and event coverage and all kinds of stuff, man. But I am Jimmy, and I am your host, and I am happy to be back here on the Horrific Podcast. Today, we continue along with our coverage of Sinister Creature Con June. Today we have Lord Bloodraw and Mr. Lobo, two independent horror hosts that really, kind of personify what it is to be a TV horror host at the independent level. They work incredibly hard, and their panel was really interesting back at Sinister June, and we're gearing up for Sinister October already. God, it's already September. Upon the recording of this, September 3rd. Big time stuff coming down, and it really kind of kicks off into full gear. Fall does with this Thursday, the season finale of Campfire Chronicles, and it being It Chapter 2. We are doing a live podcast for the season finale of it, and it should be a really fun experience for everybody who comes on out. I hope to see a lot of you guys come out. If you RSVP on the Facebook event page, you will get a red balloon. So keep that in mind. Super stoked on that. And yeah, man, I hope to see you guys all there. As soon as that show goes live, that'll go on Friday. Expect to start seeing a whole lot of haunt tour posts. We will go straight into haunt season hype and get stuff going. Along the way, we will have meetups at the State Theater. We have some really cool ones coming up next week, actually. Thursday the 12th at 7, we have Midsommar. And Friday the 13th at 9, we have Friday the 13th. So both of those are going to be fun. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of other housekeeping than that for you, other than just stay tuned and get ready to have a fun time with us. So 2 movies. We did Ready or Not, which that will be out tomorrow. That podcast will be from the State Theater. That was a lot of fun. Good times. Ready or Not, surprising film. I thought it was a well-executed movie. I did not expect it to be at all. And I thought that the lead actress is fantastic. She was really, really well, everything she did was well executed. So big congratulations to her. Cool effects, cool chemistry with the cast. Everything was well done. I also saw 47 Meters Down, Uncaged. Slow start to that film. I went and I saw that because Regal Unlimited, you get any movie that you want as many times as you want. So it's kind of hard to, if you're on the fence about a certain movie, it's worth checking the movie out because, why not? And this film started off kind of slow. As soon as they dive down, it gets a whole lot better. I mean, you would expect that with 47 Meters Down being the title. But some of the jump scares and stuff, they got me. I will give them that. But then it becomes kind of super repetitive. And I'll be honest, I thought one of the characters died. and I thought it was one character, and it was another character, and I was like, oh, it's that one. And I still didn't care. Like, I was like, oh, okay. But, you know, regardless, if you like that kind of thing, you'll enjoy the film. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't, you know, if I didn't have Regal Unlimited, I had paid, you know, a fee ticket on top of it to get in, where I could have spent money to see something else, I probably would have been upset. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, man, that's what's been going on. We've been busy. Today, actually, in the coming weeks, starting production on something that's going to be pretty cool, and we're going to put it together, and it's going to be pretty rad for the fall. I haven't been behind the camera in a while, so this is going to be a fun way to get back into it. So stay tuned for that announcement. Other than that, man, let's get into Sinister Creature Con June's coverage as we get ready for Sinister Creature Con October. Sinister Creature Con October, a whole lot is going on. We got Billy Zane, we got Tony Todd, we got another Jason, we got Tom Holland, the creator of Chucky. Just a whole lot of awesome guests coming this October that I am super excited about. So, with all that, let's get into this week's panel as we hype up Sinister Creature Con with Lord Bloodlaw and Mr. Lobo.
That was my time slot, and I was super happy about that. You're not here to listen to me ramble on, though, because nobody knows who I am. But you do know who Lord Bloodraw and Mr. Lobo are. I do not know who is sitting closer.
Are you?
We'll flip them around if we need to.
Oh,
look, is it you? Nope, there we go. It's easier that way.
Good enough.
Welcome. Thank you both for coming to Sinister Creature Con.
Thank you so much for having us. This is exciting.
Wonderful.
Usually we do a convention and it's just like an empty room where, you know, we're emceeing ourselves doing a panel in front of, you know, the cleaning staff typically.
Begging for attention. People,
Yes.
Please come look at my table.
No. You guys got a host and everything. It's wonderful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jay, for having us.
It's nice for us to be hosted for a change.
Yes,
Thank you.
they're hosting hosts.
Yes, that's right.
You're going to create a wormhole. It's just the whole table's just going to collapse in on
A
itself.
That's right.
hostception, maybe? It could be.
Ooh.
I got this wonderful bumper sticker over there from Lord Bloodraw at his table. This all of my friends are horror hosts, so I figured this was fitting.
Jeff Carlson in Chicago.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Very great horror artist.
Maniac Monsters Designs. Incredible.
Maniac Monsters design.
Yes.
He also did the fabulous image of Lord Bloodraw as a maniac-styled iron-on illustration.
You have one as well, don't you?
I do.
That's
have
right.
one.
Yeah, he did
it
you
was,
too.
It was on a. It was he called me. It was when he was doing the shirt ads. He had like these magazine kind of ads where there was a lot of, you know, Metaluna Mutant and Frankenstein and all sorts of things. And he wanted to start doing horror hosts, and he said, you know, would you mind if I drew you in that style? And I'm like, are you kidding?
I know. Yeah.
Waiting my whole life to be.
Is this working?
A monster iron-on style image.
Yes. Oh, yeah. For anybody just to say, yes, I want to draw you.
Yeah, sure.
How often does that happen?
Just once for me personally, and I had to pose like a French girl for some reason.
That ship's
I've got one of those pictures.
You were the one.
I was the one.
Let's talk about how this starts. The idea of horror hosts still continuing is
Yes.
amazing and just so awe-inspiring, and I really I wish I would have known this when I was younger, that this was still a pathway, because I would have absolutely loved that.
Would you like to lie down on the couch and
If I could, that would be great. That would be wonderful. How did both of you start at this? Who were your influences? Where did you begin?
Blood Raw, you want to
Oh,
start
sure,
with that?
yes. I grew up loving the genre, watching, as everyone of a certain age did in the Bay Area, creature features with Bob Wilkins and John Stanley. Absolutely. And just was inspired to explore those films, watching Bob and watching John. Never thought I was going to be a horror host until one day, friends of the family who happened to own a winery said, we want to do a show. We want to do shows. Like, all right. The winemaker had fallen in love with the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space. Loved it. Loved that film. Loved it.
Great film.
Fantastic film. And he contacted me and said, do you know any hosts who could do this? And I'm like, well, no. At this time, we didn't know each other well. Like, no, I really don't. John's not really doing anything. And we're sitting there having a glass of wine. My wife turned to me and said, why the hell don't you do it? And it was 10 years ago, and I had no answer. So I just came up with the character of Lord Bloodraw, developed the character of Lord Bloodraw. That was 10 years ago, and I'm still doing shows there. Now I've got the TV series, and it felt so natural at the time. Just like, oh, yes, of course I'm gonna host a horror film. Of course that's what I'm going to do. If you'd asked me before that, I would have said, no, you're crazy. I couldn't do that. I couldn't get in front of an audience or be on TV and host a horror movie like Bob or John. No, I couldn't do that. Now I can't imagine not doing it. I've just fallen in love with presenting these films that I have always loved and a lot of audiences love. And I really love sharing that experience.
You discover your real self. We're here, we're fear.
As
we're horror hosts.
Get used to it.
Get used to it. I think everyone's a horror host. I think it's a spectrum. You just basically, I think it's very, I don't know if it's necessarily just American, but I think it's looked at as an American thing. But there's always the storyteller. There's always the narrator. There's always the person who brings you to the other side. Mm-hmm. The guy who takes you across the river Styx. The guy who's got all the weirdness connections. Sometimes that's just a weird uncle who's got too many collectibles on his shelf. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of this is rite of passage. A lot of this is that when we're young, we try to discover who we are and our interests, and then we fall into that weirdness zone and like, whoa, my dad never showed me this, or my mom never showed me this. And sometimes that is your dad and your mom. It's like dad is going, hey, check out this movie. When I was a kid, my dad watched creature features. I was really young, and I was terrified of those movies. But if I wanted to hang out with Dad, I had to crawl out to him and sit next to him on the while he was sleeping in the recliner. Bob Wilkins was talking to me, and what I liked about Bob was that he was such a calming presence. It's like those movies were so over the top. He showed a lot of Hammer stuff. He showed a lot of rough movies. Lady Frankenstein, Frank Monster grabs a bird out of the air and eats it, and I would just be ruined for bedwetting nightmares with some of these movies. And Bob was always so calming and funny, and he was just a cool guy to watch a movie with on a Saturday night. And so it's funny because I crawled out to the living room to be close to my dad, but it was really Bob that was talking to me and spending time with me, and was a companion. And a horror host is a companion, and I think that it's much more fun to share a movie with someone, even if it's a surrogate, even if it's an imaginary character. But if you watch a lot of movies, even like The Secret of Nim, Nicodemus or whatever, he's a horror host. Or Tales from the Crypt, the Crypt Keeper is a horror host. John Cassier is here in the building, right? The Crypt Keeper right here. So I watched Bob, but I also watched The Twilight Zone. I thought that Rod Serling and The Night Gallery, oh my God. Mm-hmm. I just would go hiding under the coffee table you know, and those picture frames forever coming at you.
Thriller with Boris Karloff.
Thriller with Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
So, you know, Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yes.
You know, and Alfred Hitchcock was a sort of larger-than-life character. You know, he was like the Walt Disney of horror, where he was letting you in a little bit into the magic kingdom of his imagination. And Rod Serling was kind of like that, too. So I guess for me, I saw these guys as kind of idols. I remember doing funny voices in the bathroom mirror and all that stuff. And then I wrote for a magazine called Planet X, and we wrote an article about Bob Wilkins. This was as an adult, of course. And we had a live creature feature show. We invited Bob to come out and host. It came from outer space in 3D. And we had Hardware Wars, the short Hardware Wars, which is a spoof of Star Wars, which Bob Wilkins showed a lot on Creature Features, and the director of that film, Ernie Facilius, in the house as well. And we did a few of these live shows at Harlow's in Sacramento here, and as well as other places, and these Creature Features revival shows. And I wrote a lot of jokes for Bob for those appearances, and Bob was very generous and said, you know, you should get out in a chair and host horror movies. And I said, Bob, I could never do what you do. I mean, this is about when we were kids, and you know, I wasn't really ready to hear that kind of thing, even though secretly I think we all want that kind of attention. And you know, and just because somebody says you should do something, that doesn't mean there's an opportunity or a time or a way to really do it in a way that other people can really even see. I started doing little clandestine little things in the garage where I would film things on a camcorder, and it was like, I want to say 7 to 9 years of doing things that no one ever saw, or maybe I'd host movies at a birthday party or something. And then in 2001, I worked at Channel 10 here in Sacramento, News 10, at the production department, and they had a movie that ran 20 minutes short on Saturday nights. And Bob used to send me these little cassette tapes with little pep talks and little postcards. And I just went in there and said, look, you've got this movie that runs 20 minutes short. I think I could fill that 20 minutes with something. And we developed the formula for Cinema Insomnia. And what was interesting about it is that, you know, we made a pilot to see if they liked it or not. And they didn't care. They just aired it. And they're like, where's next week's? I'm like, well, you're supposed to tell us whether you liked it or not. Where's next week? Okay. So we just hit the ground running. We did 24 episodes at News 10. We did a bunch more for Sacramento Public Access. We did a ton of them for syndication. And we were on KTEH in the San Francisco Bay Area from 2005 to 2009, I think, or 2008. And now we're on streaming, and that's the whole story. Wow, that was long. Sorry.
No, I should add that you are one of my inspirations because I love you, man. Because I saw you before I even dreamed of doing any of this.
Saw you at be that hard.
Saw you at WonderCon years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
And this is the same one where I saw Bob Wilkins. Was like, oh my God, Bob Wilkins is still around. He's doing conventions now. And then I saw you, and I'm like, oh, what do you do? And you said, oh, I'm a horror host. And I was like, that's still a thing? That still happens? Kind of like what we did.
Literally what I said to you when I met you 2 years ago here. Wait, people are still doing this? This is awesome. Who are they? I
had that moment with Lobo. I don't even remember what year it was, but it was years ago, back when WonderCon was in San Francisco. I was like, oh, it's still a viable thing? There's people still doing that? That's wonderful. That's great.
So both of you have a completely different style of your hosting. You mentioned several other hosts, Bob Wilkins. I grew up with Whitey Gleason, which was a completely different type of host.
31, right? Was he 31 or 50?
36. I believe it was 36.
Oh, he was on 36 too?
I think he was on 36 as well. That's where I thought I caught him, but I grew up way out on a farm. I don't know what channels I ended up getting. So you mentioned all of these people. Completely different styles, completely different looks, completely different, but they're all horror hosts. So what would be if we were going to define the artwork, the skill that is a horror host, what are some of the things other than a companion for the weird that nobody else is your companion for? What else makes a horror host?
I completely agree with Mr. Lobo about the horror host being a companion to watch the movie with. John Stanley, at a horror host panel, again at WonderCon years ago, said something that really struck me. He said, horror hosts are like shaman. The purpose of a shaman in a tribe is to go to the other world, go to the outer limits, come back and say, hey, I can show you the way there. I can show you some pretty freaky stuff over here. Come on, it's fine. We'll be safe. I'll lead you by the hand and show you all this stuff, and I'll take you right back here again, and you'll be fine. That was his definition of a horror host, and that really struck me. But there's no one definition. I mean, there are hosts that just do everything 100% about the movie. There are hosts that barely acknowledge they're showing a movie and have got almost like a sitcom going on. There are horror hosts where there's a movie going on and it's an interview show. Well, you said it's like folk art, and I absolutely agree with that. It's like folk art. If you're presenting a movie in the horror or science fiction genre, one of the outer genres, you're a horror host, essentially. There are degrees, there are different types of horrors, like you say, but they're horror hosts,
I think it's interesting when people say, when did you get into horror hosting? Like, that's the word. You're hosting horror. Mm-hmm. You're not horror hosting.
Yeah.
That's, you're not Heil Hitlering. Right? You're heiling Hitler. Or hopefully none of you are heiling Hitler. That's a bad example. It's just
bad example. Bad Lobo.
But semantics aside, I do think hosting horror is the number one qualification for being a horror host. If you're hosting horror, you are a horror host. It doesn't matter if you have a TV show or a radio show, or I think the tradition started very early. We had the spook show tradition in this country. We had the traveling show where you'd have Dr. Terror or a Swami who would do like a Grand Guignol kind of presentation where there would be little weird stage acts, or maybe they would show a horror film, or perhaps they would just have a magic tricks and sideshow tricks, and there would be one spooky character who kind of ties it all together. In the radio programs, you had The Old Witch and Inner Sanctum.
That's right.
A lot of the radio programs had this kind of narrator, and again, the function of having a character like that is, okay, this week the story's about a mummy, next week the story is about a serial killer, the week after that it's a story about Frankenstein. The only thing that makes it feel like you're watching the same show is the host segment. So and it's very important in an anthology of anything to have a wraparound that is consistent so you can hold on to that audience. And when the movies of the 30s came to television in the 50s, they're like, how do we get people to watch every week? We're showing Frankenstein this weekend, and next weekend it might be The Brain That Wouldn't Die. We're going to have ratings like this for Frankenstein, but then we're going to have ratings down in the gutter for The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And how do we create a consistent program where people will come back week after week and watch that movie no matter what that movie is? So I think as far as the basic definition of the television horror host is to be the ringleader of whatever anthology of horror that you have, and I think that the characters even in the Tales from the Crypt comic book all function as a horror host.
Oh yeah.
So you've got a situation where not only is it a companion, but it's a way to kind of hold on to that audience by creating a thread of consistency through a body of films or a body of content.
Well, you can draw a direct line from the very first horror host in any broadcast medium, which was in The Witch's Tale, 1931 on the radio, Nancy the Old Witch of Salem, and her black cat Satan.
And you wrote a fabulous article about radio horror hosts.
Oh,
once upon a time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I did. When you had the magazine, I wrote an article about that. But you can draw a direct line from the radio horror hosts through EC Comics, because all of those were horror-hosted comics directly to TV, to now still TV and also streaming, and thank God for streaming.
And even in like Rob Zombie movies and stuff like that, you've got like, horror host type characters in those films. This sort of character that is sort of connected to the genre in some way.
Right. We're the character that constantly breaks the fourth wall. We're on the other side of the fourth wall with the audience, leading them through the stories. Yeah.
That was something that was really interesting when Bob Wilkins was on Cinema Insomnia. We did a whole show together, and I wrote 11 pages of material. And when I did the show with Bob, I threw all that material in the trash because we did so much improvisation. And the interesting thing about Bob is that his connection to the audience was much more important than his connection to the material.
Yeah.
What's interesting about John Stanley is that I did a show with John Stanley also, and we did all 11 pages of material because John comes from a writing background.
That's right.
And he really respects the author above everything else. So, it was very important to him that we did all of my jokes and we did everything very exacting to the script.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see there's two different styles of hosts like that. But I did realize that if you're into your material like this, or we're having a conversation like this, we're really leaving the audience out.
Absolutely, that's right.
And something I realized early on is when I would do interviews, I would get these letters from people going, Mr. Lobo, I felt kind of left out. You were just talking to your guests the whole time. And you realize that these are people who spend 2 hours with you every week, and they have a real connection to you. So now when I interview someone, we're interviewing Blood Raw. A lot of you out there probably have a question for Blood Raw. So now it becomes a three-way interview versus just a two-way interview.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the audience is a character on the show.
That's right. Well, I know you've done a lot of it too, but I know when I do my show, I'm staring down the barrel of the camera, talking to everybody watching the show. So, yeah, did you see that? That was straight. What do they mean by that? Why would the writer write something like that?
It is important to talk to the audience because nobody talks to you anymore. It's like we're like a Mr. Rogers with a Dracula cape. it's like even newscasters are reading to you. A horror host talks to you and includes you, and I think that is an important aspect, at least in the ones that I've seen. And I think there are some rare exceptions, but I think horror hosts are always a diversion. They're always a little funny. Very rarely is the horror host trying to out-spooky the movie. Usually the horror host is a comic, even Elvira, they usually have something humorous in their presentation, which kind of is like a warm-up. So that's another observation.
And comic relief, depending on the film as well.
Are funny.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, because you touched on the fact that two different shows, one of them script word for word, the other one improv. What percentage do you think your own show, quite often, are you very script oriented, that it's very start to finish, this is how I do every one of my shows? Is there just a little room for improv, or do you improv most of it from an outline?
I'm scripted, but when I'm filming, if something else occurs to me, or something that I wrote in the script triggers another thought, and I think it's funny, I'll throw it in. So it's got, for me, it's 95% scripted. The rest of it is improv.
I do come from a background of writing, but I do have some improv in my background. So I guess sometimes some of the shows are 50-50 where I write the show, but I purposely paint myself into a corner where I leave a few black holes of uncertainty where I kind of force myself to come up with something off the top of my head. But I do, most of them are written. There are some where they're somewhat experimental, where I've decided that the first half's going to be written and the second half's going to be all improv, or this week we're going to do it entirely. Like if you watch the Red House episode, that is a completely unscripted episode. We had no idea where we were going to end up when we started, but we just decided to do that episode that way. And we didn't even clean up the studio. I had to actually clean up the studio while I was doing the episode, where I'm moving boxes out of the way so we could start filming, and so we're just playing off of whatever's in the environment and doing a whole show that's completely unscripted. So again, I guess with me, it's half and half. Some of it's scripted and some of it's not.
Didn't you do an episode where you hosted Carnival of Souls, where you ran the reels out of sync? I was so confused that night. I couldn't tell you.
I restarted the movie with Carnival of Souls. I mess with movies a little bit sometimes. With a movie like Carnival of Souls, you kind of feel like you've watched it twice when you're watching it once. But with Carnival of Souls, what I had done is I actually got into a little bit of a blood feud with another horror host accidentally. When we first went on the air in Norfolk, Virginia, there was a horror host there that was well loved and grandfathered into the community, but he hadn't done a show in a while. And when we started airing there, it really fired him up, and he came out of retirement and started running the same movies we were running only the day before.
Oh.
So he would do his movie on Friday night, and so we had a big thing in the newspaper, and it listed what the first 8 episodes were going to be. So, our first episode was Night of the Living Dead on Saturday. Well, he showed it Friday night. And our second episode was The Brain That Wouldn't Die on Saturday, and he showed it Friday night. So he just came out of retirement and just squashed me like a bug. And what was funny is that after we were driven off the air, he kind of drifted back into semi-retirement again, But he didn't like that idea of somebody else in his territory. And I get it. It's kind of like, radio DJs kind of have that a little territorial. And that's a very more old school broadcaster. And I'm not saying anything disparaging about the guy. But the way I defend myself is with my humor. So with the Carnival of Souls episode, there's actually 3 horror hosts showing the same movie on the same night to compete with each other.
That's right.
And that is me making fun of that situation. If you take that premise out to its most ridiculous conclusion, is can you really compete with someone by doing the same thing, right? So we have one horror host starting the movie, and then about 20 minutes into it, the second horror host starts the movie. So you see the beginning of the movie twice, but it very quickly catches up with itself. And then by the third time, it's very quickly but you see the whole movie start from the very beginning 3 times. So it feels like you've watched the movie 3 times. In the process of that episode, the Carnival of Souls episode. But again, that's, I guess, a little bit of the sort of more experimental things that we do with some of the movies. We just did a thing with a movie called we did Bride of the Monster at the Bow Theater.
Right.
And that movie just loses its mind in the last act anyway. And so there's a movie called Frankenstein Conquers the World, where it has a giant Frankenstein caveman thing fighting an octopus, and we just have him just appear at the mouse reel, throwing a rock at the octopus and
fighting the octopus that attacks Lugosi. Nice.
That is, again, that's not a Criterion appreciation of that film, but a lot of our viewers are kind of on it's either the next level thing where it's like, okay, I've already seen this movie 40 times and this is another reason to watch this movie, or they're the beginning level where it's a struggle for them to keep with the movie, and this is kind of like putting their baby toe into it because they've got a companion. It's broken up with a lot of like trailers and fun stuff and comedy bits, and then a lot of them will go, wow, now that I've watched this movie, I really want to just watch it complete, watch it clean without any of the fun stuff around it. And so you end up turning people onto a movie they wouldn't normally give the time of day. So it's the horror host format is really great for beginners and expert level movie watchers.
Oh yeah, now, and kids, yeah.
We mentioned that we start in radio, we move on to comics, we move on to television, and now we're all on streaming. So where is it that did you initially mean to make that jump when you saw streaming, or did it just an opportunity presented itself? How did you do this to the streaming?
You've got no choice, really. I mean, I was lucky in that I was doing only live shows for a couple of years. And then I did a panel at a convention on horror hosting similar to this, and somebody stood up and said, I'm the program manager at KCTH. we'd like to run your TV show. I said, I don't have one, but I'll put one together for you. And that's how I put together my show. I didn't even own a camera, so I started doing it. So I was lucky that I got on broadcast TV, then I was able to get on 2 broadcast stations in the Midwest. So I'm on regular TV there. But after that, I thought, oh, this must be easier than I thought. I'm going to be able to collect stations. Those are the 3 broadcast stations I am on. The rest of it is streaming.
On broadcast. I'm very lucky. I have a few, like you, I've got a few over-the-air small
rare,
local stations that run cinema insomnia late at night on regular TV.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, not a lot of people have their rabbit ears anymore. So
That's right.
It's very,
That's
very,
right.
You know, I mean, with me, I was contacted by Zombie TV in 2012, I think, and that was a streaming channel, a new horror channel, and they were like, we really want to have your show on there, but we also want you on as an advisor. We want you to help us brand the channel, all this stuff. So it was a big factor in convincing me to move back east, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was sort of a platform for me. They had a full studio to film in, a beautiful soundstage to do the show in, and they had a lot of goals. Well, they puffed up the channel and sold it. And so we were showing up to film one day, and they were locking the doors because they had
sold it out to
the channel to a competitor that just wanted to close it down. So we were still having fun, and we were still. And my wife Dixie and I said, well, if it was our channel, because we did a lot of artwork for the channel. I opened up my address book, all my filmmaker producer friends. I mean, we provide a lot of content for that channel. A lot of the success of that channel, none of which we saw.
Enough which they could sell it.
Yeah, was stuff that we did. And we're like, well, if it was us and we had our own channel, what would we do differently? And that's how we started OSI 74. OSI 74 is kind of like a UHF station from another universe.
Yes.
And it when I was a kid, there was always the station that had all the weird stuff.
Yep.
And then there were some video labels that had all the weird stuff, with the Rhino and stuff like that. They'd always put out the weird, something weird, and they always had all the weird stuff. And I thought, why limit it to just horror? There's a lot of horror channels. It would be cool if we could just kind of focus on things that were weird or funny or retro or some combination of weird, funny, and retro. And we had people from Guar giving us content. We had Trauma giving us content. Church of the Subgenius gave us content. We had just tons of partners. We got stuff from Devo on there and Negative Land and all these like weird kind of strange off-center things, as well as other horror hosts. Lord Bloodraw's show is on there. Bob Wilkins' shows are on there. We're going to have the new Creature Features shows on the channel. And so it became kind of a collective or an umbrella to like, okay, well, how do we find all the weird kids? And how do we keep them all in our bubble? Obviously, I can't make enough content just by myself to hang on to that audience. And so if there's a lot of people there with content, then we can kind of just keep people with us and as our new stuff drops.
If you don't have a Roku, OSI 74 is worth the purchase of the Roku alone. Honestly, amazing content on that station. It's great.
I really wish that I could continue talking with you the rest of the day, because this is inspiring for me as far as seeing this art form still continue and loving every second of it. And I hope that it inspires somebody else out here to move forward and do what both of these gentlemen are doing as far as being a host and introducing other people to the weird stuff you love. So do me a favor, before you give them a round of applause, promise me that you're going to go to buy each one of these gentlemen's booths and get some of their merch. Talk to them some more, anything you can, because that's what's going to keep them coming to conventions, is if you go and support them at their tables. So let's get a round of applause for Mr. Lobo and Lord Bloodlaw.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, and Jay, since you actually hosted Horror Host, I think...
So there you go, man. I hope you enjoyed listening to that panel. Hope you enjoyed today's show. We will be back on the air tomorrow for you. We will have that Ready or Not from the State Theater show. And then Friday, we will have the season finale from It Chapter 2. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week. It's starting to get cool. It's starting to become fall, man. Best time of the year. Thank you for listening. Stay spooky, and we'll see you down the line.